Today we're on Rocky Gap Road above Lovell Canyon Road. Let's take a look and just see a few landmarks. There's Lovell Canyon Road. Lovell Canyon is off Highway 160 between Las Vegas and Pahrump. There you can see Lovell Canyon Road. You can see some ridges on the far side of the road. There, I think it's Tuft Hairgrass Road. Not absolutely certain, but the word hairgrass is in it. And this is Rocky Gap Road. We're looking into the sunrise here. The goal today, you're looking at the Wilson Ridge. Those high points ahead are the Wilson Ridge. What we're going to do is go up Rocky Gap Road just a little bit and then take the ridge just north or left of Lovell Canyon Road and head up to some of these high points. Ultimately, a great goal would be to reach Red Rock Summit, which looks down upon the Bridge Mountain Trailhead at the summit of Rocky Gap Road, and then perhaps take a left and head north along the Wilson Ridge. See how far we can go till our turnaround point. And then just for a little more perspective, there's what I refer to as the Wilson Ridge Southern High Point. And we've been up to that high point before, headed back down the ridge toward this area. But there's quite a stretch that we have not yet covered on the Wilson Ridge between Rocky Gap Road and the Wilson Ridge Southern High Point. And then looking over in this direction, you can see the Wilson Ridge continuing up to, and just over this ridge in the foreground, you can see the tip of Harris Mountain. And Harris Mountain is at the north end of the Wilson Ridge. And I guess Harris Mountain would be the northern high point. The southern high point is about 8,500 feet. That's why I refer to it as the southern high point for the Wilson Ridge, although there are high points below. Nothing quite as prominent. So let's go ahead and head up Rocky Gap Road, find a place to take a left and get onto this ridge on the left, and then from there we'll see about getting up to the Red Rock Summit. Here we go. Well, this looks like as good a place as any to ascend this ridge. And so let's go ahead and start ascending the ridge just north to the left of Rocky Gap Road here. And looking ahead, I believe what we're looking at up ahead is the tip of the Red Rock Summit, that rocky outcrop. And that would be our first goal. Let's just see how this ridge helps us get up to that point. And then what you're looking at is the gap in the Wilson Ridge through which Rocky Gap Road cuts. Everything to the right of that V-shaped gap is Wilson Ridge continuing south. Everything to the left of that gap is the Wilson Ridge continuing north. Okay, we're at the first high point on this ridge. And as you can see from my other ridges on my other videos on the approach ridges for the Wilson Ridge, it's always a matter of just going from high point to high point, because you really can't see what's ahead beyond that next high point. There's the next high point. I want you to notice a great thing. There's a fire break, which is going to make it a little easier to navigate up this high point. We certainly don't get much help like that on these approach ridges. But anyway, yeah, going from high point to high point is, we get up to this next high point, we look around, see what's beyond. And now we're looking down on the canyon where Rocky Gap Road is located. Little section of Rocky Gap Road below. And by the way, when it comes time to head south of Rocky Gap Road on the Wilson Ridge, our approach ridge will be across this shallow canyon and then up this approach ridge. And boy, it does look pretty much, pretty broken up there, but beyond some of these high points, and I think this one here, if you're going south on the Wilson Ridge, there's a crossover to the Rainbow Mountains Upper Crest Ridge line, and I think it's up in this area above us on the south ridge, the south approach ridge. But for today, we're on the north approach ridge, and the goal, the large goal, is to navigate the entire Wilson Ridge between where it begins below in Lovell Canyon and all the way up to Harris Mountain. Speaking of which, let's see if we got a better shot of Harris Mountain. Yeah. There we go. So you can see the southern high point. I'm going to trace from the southern high point up to Harris Mountain summit, and then a little to the left of Harris Mountain, you'll see some of Mummy Mountain, and then further left, beyond that saddle through which you can see Mummy Mountain, you're going to see Griffith Peak and the Sexton Ridge heading down the opposite side of Lovell Canyon. So let's go ahead and check the Wilson Ridge out above us here. So going to the southern high point first. Now tracing our way over. Okay, yeah, here we are back on the Wilson Ridge beyond those shrubs there. And here is Harris Mountain. Saddle, Mummy Mountain, up to Griffith Peak, And to the left, heading back down, is Sexton Ridge. Little larger view here of what we just looked at. And that's another goal. Head up the Wilson Ridge all the way to Harris Mountain, cross over to Griffith Peak, and then down Sexton Ridge for a huge loop. That'll happen sometime in the future. Okay, but for now, up to this next high point on the approach ridge, northern approach ridge to the Wilson Ridge. Well, here's some news. That area, that strip that I thought was a fire break on this next high point, actually is a complicated rocky section, kind of cliff wash. Definitely don't want to take that. That would slow us down a lot. So, yeah, I'm going to head to the left, and it looks like there are a little bit of rocks to encounter even to the left. Let's just see what happens on this next high point. Well, on the way to this next high point, yeah, it's rocky, but not really bad, and a way keeps opening up. All this is limestone, and I'm seeing fossils in these limestone. And another thing that I've seen is actually an entirely preserved branch of a tree that looks like it's not even fossilized, but because it's in the limestone, it could be 400 million years old. We don't know, but it's still beautifully preserved as a piece of wood. Anyway, onward. Well, the key to this high point, which remains pretty wide open, is to hug the upper edge of this rocky wash that we saw earlier, thinking that it might be a fire break. And obviously it's not. It's pretty rocky down there. A lot of obstacles. But just above, the going's really nice. Well, this is an interesting fossil. Looks almost like something with teeth and an open mouth. Or maybe it's just a sea anemone. Okay, continuing on up. Another vein of fossils, potentially in the 450 million year old zone. And what limestone is basically, it's the ocean bottom. And over millions of years, the rock and mud, mostly mud on the bottom of the ocean, sunk and developed into thicker and thicker layers. And in the meantime, sea life died and was mixed with this rock. And if you look at it closely, it really does look like mud that has solidified. And when the seashells mixed with it over those millions of years, the calcium in the seashells helped the rock to solidify. And so that's what you have with limestone all around us. It's really an ancient ocean bottom. So pretty cool. And then just packed with fossils. Here's another fossil rock. You can see all the fossils embedded here. And it's about a 45-degree angle. And what happened here is that, and on most of this slope, is that the tectonic activity of the earth pushed this earlier, or formerly horizontal ocean bottom up to 30, 45-degree angle and more. Okay, here's a bit of a more open area. That high point that we were looking at earlier is a series of high points that just keeps going up. We can actually, not from right here, but we can see not too far is the Red Rock summit, blocked by the trees right now. And so I'm going to show a series of shots here from the southern high point. We're going to trace the Wilson Ridge up to Harris Mountain, and then down the saddle, through the saddle, you can see Mummy Mountain, and then up to Griffith Peak and down Sexton Ridge. So here we go. Southern high point. So Wilson Ridge up to Harris Mountain. And remember that Harris Mountain Triangle adventure? That took the ridge to the right of Harris Mountain, up to Harris Mountain. And you can see the another high point that almost looked like a false summit when we were there, but now it is very clearly not anywhere near the summit of Harris Mountain. Saddle, Mummy Mountain. Griffith Peak. Sexton Ridge. And when we ascend and descend Sexton Ridge, we're on at the base of Sexton Ridge, we are on the Griffith Shadow Loop Trail, somewhere down in this area. And then, of course, Lovell Canyon, right between Harris Mountain and Griffith Peak, descending. Okay, I believe we are on the Wilson Ridge, or at least very, very close to being on the Wilson Ridge. Just give you an idea of what the terrain is like up here. Yeah, fairly easy going. Once we reached this altitude, which is right now about 7,100 feet, still ascending a bit, but there's going to be ascents and descents all along the Wilson Ridge. Wow, look at this. What a view. up Lovell Canyon, down Lovell Canyon, or at least across. And we'll see more. Right now we're pretty much in a forest up here. Juniper, pine, mostly juniper. At least right in this spot. It changes a lot. So let's continue on. Pretty soon we'll get a really good look at Red Rock Summit. Okay, more views opening up. There you can see Rocky Gap Road below. Going up to the Bridge Mountain Trailhead. And then I'm going to zoom in on North Peak. It's just to the right of what we're looking at is Red Rock Summit, right in the center there. Let's look at North Peak. And North Peak is on the Rainbow Mountains Upper Crest Ridgeline, so we'll trace that to the right. There you can see it, and here we're looking at the Wilson Ridge continuing south from Rocky Gap Road. Yeah, those high points do not look too very friendly. And then we're looking right down in the gap of the Wilson Ridge where Rocky Gap Road is. That's why it's called Rocky Gap Road, right through that gap of the Wilson Ridge. And then looking over, tracing the Wilson Ridge north from Red Rock Summit. And there's the southern high point. And as we're up here looking around, I'm always aware of potential descent ridges back to Lovell Canyon. And it looks like yeah, there's a descent ridge that begins around this high point in the center. We'll trace that a little ways. And I may actually make that a circuit for today, is heading over to this high point to the left of Red Rock Summit and then heading down its descent ridge. And then next time we'll head up that ridge and continue on the Wilson Ridge. We'll see. And just to give a perspective here of this ridge, yeah, things get broken up as you get to this elevation on the Wilson Ridge. So it's just a matter of weaving around all the rocky outcrops like the one that you see here. I'm not going to go down this, but what I'm going to do is head over and see if I can circle it to one side, and then I'm down in a saddle and then heading upward to the next high points. Navigating the Wilson Ridge in places is a matter of weaving through sometimes rather thick brush, looking for an opening. Wow. And then there are rocks and ledges. So yeah, it's slow going, very careful, but up to now, there's always been a way. Never know when I'm going to hit that dead end cliff. Hopefully we won't. But wow, look at this. Here's quite a juniper display. How brilliant. Okay, here's the Wilson Ridge going south. By the way, I didn't mention yet that this is the second week in September, and that's when the junipers are in bloom up here at this altitude. Okay, you can see the Wilson Ridge, and then that ridge behind is the Rainbow Crest upper ridge line. So what the Wilson Ridge does, it heads south, but then there's a crossover point somewhere right just to the right of this area. You can't see it from here. There's a crossover point. So you could ascend the Wilson Ridge, head south, and cross over to the Rainbow Mountains Upper Crest Ridgeline. And then here we're looking up toward the Wilson, or the Red Rock Summit area. And maybe we'll get up there. It depends. It looks a little gnarly. And then looking down below is Rocky Gap Road. And I'm going to zoom in on that stretch of Rocky Gap Road that I call the stretch from hell. And you can see on the video for Rocky Gap Road from Lovell Canyon to Bridge Mountain Trailhead. And during that stretch, Rocky Gap Road is actually awash with huge boulders. But I did see a Rubicon navigate that section. So, wow, pretty cool. Okay, let's continue on. Never know when I'm going to hit a dead end that's going to stop me, but hey, let's keep going. see what happens. Well, here I am, way up toward, if not just about on, the Red Rock summit. Things we can see here, there's the gap below. You can see Rocky Gap Road heading up toward that gap. There's the gap in the Wilson Ridge. Then you trace it up. I'm going to zoom in and trace to the left where it meets the Rainbow Mountains upper crest ridgeline. There you can see the Wilson Ridge crossover point to the Rainbow Mountains upper crest ridgeline, and there's the tip of Mount Wilson. And we are way up here, hanging on the edge. The further up I get, the more narrow this catwalk, and the steeper the descent on either side. And this is probably the less steep side. So I don't know how much further I'm going to go along here. I'd like to see up ahead where there might be a point on the ridge where I can head north, but I just don't know. It's not looking like it right now, so we'll see what happens. Okay, we're on Red Rock Summit, and let's point out some things. There's the gap straight ahead, Wilson Ridge heading south, Potosi Mountain in the background. Then over to Mount Wilson. And there's that connector between the Wilson Ridge and Mount Wilson. Wilson Ridge. Rainbow Mountains upper crest ridgeline. And there we are, skirting the Rainbow Mountains upper crest ridgeline from Mount Wilson. North Peak. Continuing north. Gotta watch my footing here. There's the upper area of Buffalo Wall. I also call that Paradise Plateau. Very beautiful red rock area. Turtlehead Peak. Damsel Peak. Edge of the La Madre Mountains. El Padre. And this is heading north on the Wilson Ridge. Boy, I wanted to get over to that next ridge and then take the down ridge. That looks like much easier ridge than the one I just ascended. And I am either going to have to turn around and descend the one I just ascended with all its catwalks and crossing over and back to one side of the ridge and then the other. Sure be nice to be able to continue along here instead, but I just don't see it happening. And there we have the Torino Ranch. We'll go from Harris Mountain to Griffith Peak, up the Wilson Ridge to Harris Mountain, across the saddle to Griffith Peak, down Sexton Ridge, back into Lovell Canyon. And then just doing the rest of the circuit here. And by the way, there's my reference bluff. That's above Lovell Canyon Road. And yeah, I'm going to have to piece my way back down this ridge because I'm at the turnaround point. Wow. That's going to be a challenge, but hey, got to do it. So here we go.